Story 1. The exit ramp that looped me back without turning. This happened to me in 2019. I'd been doing long-haul trucking for just over a year at the time. Most of my routes kept me within the Midwest, but that summer I picked up a job moving modular kitchen equipment from a supplier in Kansas City to a hospitality build in rural Utah. It wasn't the distance that got to me. It was the emptiness. That stretch of highway through central Colorado, endless flat, always felt like driving across a mirror. I left around 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. The air was cold, headlights still cutting through dew, but the roads were dry. I kept a strict log: miles, rest stops, fuel, sleep. About 4 hours in, I topped off my tank outside Salina and took a quick bathroom break. From there, it was supposed to be a straight shot for another 90 miles until my next waypoint, a diner right off exit 223, where I usually grabbed lunch. I'd stopped there 3 times before. I knew the signage. I knew the exit ramp. Around mile marker 178, something shifted. It wasn't visual, just this subtle lag in recognition. I passed an old green sign for a gas station, the kind that hasn't been updated since the 90s, and had this weird moment where I couldn't remember if I'd already passed it. I chalked it up to fatigue. I hadn't slept well the night before, and coffee only carried me so far. 15 minutes later, I passed it again. Same sign, same leaning pole, same rust pattern around the edges. I pulled to the side, turned on my hazards, and double-checked the odometer. My trip meter read 56 miles since Salina. I was sure I'd driven that far. My fuel drop supported it. I even checked the log app on my phone. It showed movement, consistent with the distance, but the scenery was wrong, or right, depending on how you looked at it. The same slight right curve, same flat-topped hills in the distance. I even recognized a white-painted fence line with a collapsed section on the north side. I pressed on. Just keep driving, I told myself. This is open country. Things repeat. That's what open land does. It echoes. But then I saw the diner sign. Exit 223, the famous corner pancakes. That's the part I can't explain. That sign only existed after the split in the road. It came just before the off-ramp with a 25 mph curve that looped right, then wrapped under itself onto the access road. It should have been 30 miles ahead, not 10, except I was already exiting. The road curved, the ramp arched down exactly as I remembered. My tires hummed on the concrete seams, the truck tilted right, then leveled. When I stopped at the diner, I didn't go in. I sat in the lot and just stared at the dashboard. My trip meter said 76 miles, close to what it should have been. But when I opened my fuel history, it showed the same stretch as if I'd gone nowhere. 2 data points, Salina and here, with a line that suggested a straight shot. No detour, no repeat. That's when it hit me. I couldn't prove I'd actually left that stretch of highway. I knew I'd driven it, but I had no way to explain how I'd gotten back here so soon. It was like something had dragged the road beneath me while I was moving, resetting the background like a conveyor belt. I went inside, ordered black coffee, and didn't speak. I stared out the window. Same weather, same cars. Even the same guy with the beard I'd seen once months earlier, sitting in the corner booth, eating alone. When I left an hour later, I didn't reset the trip meter. I wanted to see if it'd happen again. It didn't. But every now and then, when I take the same route, I slow down at exit 223, just to look, just to be sure it's not waiting for me again. I saw it the first time about 3 months after the diner incident. It was a dead coyote, or at least that's what it looked like. Mangy, stiff-legged, lying on its side just past mile marker 201. It was sprawled out on the shoulder, head twisted at a weird angle, mouth slightly open. No visible blood, just the kind of scene you'd expect after a semi-clips an animal at 70 miles per hour. I remember thinking I should report it, that it was a hazard, close enough to the road to be a concern, but the next week it was still there. Exact same position. I noticed because I took a picture the first time. just a quick shot with my phone as I slowed to pass. I don't know why I did it. Maybe because part of me already sensed it was wrong. So when I saw it again 7 days later, same leg curled under its body, same patch of fur missing from the left flank, I compared the images. Identical. I thought maybe no one had cleaned it up. Roadkill doesn't always get removed immediately, especially in rural stretches. But what didn't make sense was the lack of decomposition. It didn't bloat. It didn't rot. No insects, no odor. It was like the thing had been freeze-dried in place. 2 weeks later, still there. Same position. I pulled over that time, got out, walked to the edge of the shoulder. There were no scavenger marks, no ants, no flies. Its eyes were open but glazed over in a way that looked painted, not dried. I didn't touch it. I don't know how to explain what I felt, but standing there, I had this sense that if I touched it, I'd break something. Not just the body, but some thread I wasn't supposed to pull. I walked back to my truck and drove on. Every run that took me down that stretch, I looked, and every time it was there, always in that same curve before the dip in elevation, always with the same curve in its spine. I asked a highway patrol guy once, just made casual small talk at a rest stop, if they ever cleared roadkill in that area. He shrugged, said they usually did it within 48 hours unless it was in the scrubland. I asked about mile 201. He just said, "That's BLM maintained out there, not us." I checked online. That stretch wasn't BLM, it was state, so I called Caltrans, filed a generic report. A month passed, the coyote stayed. One day it was gone. No marks, no drag tracks, just gone. I didn't feel relief, I felt watched. Because some part of me had started to wonder, but was it even a real animal? Or was it a marker, a reset point? Because I swear, from the time it appeared, I never needed GPS. I always knew when the next town was coming. The mile markers stopped mattering, and I stopped trusting that I was moving forward at all. In early 2020, I finally got a new truck, upgraded the cab, added dash cams, front and rear. Not for insurance reasons, but because I was starting to question my memory. I'd tell myself I'd driven a stretch before, only to find out I hadn't, or vice versa. The dealership set me up with an auto-upload dash cam that saved clips to the cloud every 6 hours. Seemed like overkill, but I kept the default. One night, driving westbound on Route 70 through Utah, I experienced something that made my stomach drop. 3 identical billboards. Not just the same ad, identical positioning, angle, background lighting, and most disturbingly, identical tiers in the lower right corner. The first one advertised a realty company. Need land? Call Tommy Dalton, 555-0177. Picture of a smiling guy in a tan blazer pointing at a mountain. I saw it at 1:03 a.m. The clock on the dash confirmed it. So did the timestamp on the dash cam file. The second one showed up at 1:11 a.m. Same ad, same guy, same torn corner. I slowed down, pulled over, rewound the footage on my phone. Side by side, I compared the 2 angles. The clouds behind the billboard, same formation, the same car tail lights just cresting the hill behind it, even the same piece of trash, a plastic bag, caught in the fencing below. I watched it a third time at 1:19 a.m. Same again, but this time my truck was on a slight left bank, so the camera caught the sign from a different tilt. And that's when it clicked. This wasn't a loop in the road. This was a presentation. Someone, or something, was showing me the billboard. 3 different camera angles, same scene, except I was the only one driving. I uploaded the clips to a backup drive. I showed them to a buddy in the industry, someone who used to work freight routes. He watched silently, didn't say a word for a while. Then he asked, "Do you ever get headaches before it happens?" I said sometimes, like a pressure building behind my eyes. He nodded and said something I haven't stopped thinking about. They say the brain can mimic loops when it's under prolonged cortisol strain, but cameras don't hallucinate. I didn't tell anyone else. I still have those files, and every time I look at them, I asked the same question. If I wasn't driving a loop, why did the road want me to think I was? Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. Story 2. She stood in the same spot for 90 miles. This happened to me in early 2021. I was hauling a load of wood flooring from Spokane down to Twin Falls, which meant a long stretch along Highway 93, mostly straight, mostly empty. I'd driven that route maybe a dozen times. It wasn't scenic, but it was dependable. Flat valleys, distant mountains, an occasional town whose name you forget before you finish passing through it. It started near Salmon. It was late, around 11:30 p.m., and the road had just turned into one of those two-lane segments with ditches on either side. I noticed a woman standing off the shoulder on my left. Not unusual, lots of hitchhikers and stranded travelers out there. But something about her posture stood out. She didn't wave. She didn't stick out a thumb. She just stood there. Long brown coat, frayed at the hem. A dark-colored beanie pulled down low. Her arms were close to her sides, and she was facing the road, not walking along it, not angled like she was heading somewhere, just watching. I passed without slowing. There wasn't a car nearby, no wreck, no bags, no lights. I told myself she might have just had a breakdown and was waiting for help. But 20 minutes later, near a bend after a cattle overpass, I saw her again. Same coat, same shape, same way of standing. This time, her boots caught my attention. They didn't match. One looked like a black rubber work boot, the other a brown leather ankle cut. The left one had a tear around the toe, frayed like it had been caught on barbed wire. It wasn't just someone similar, it was her. I kept driving. That stretch between Salmon and Chalice is mostly empty, barely even guardrails. I passed a few road signs, one truck going the opposite direction, and then, at a slight incline with a slope down into dark sagebrush, I saw her again, same spot in the road, always to my left, always just barely inside the high beams, like she was placed there. By the fourth time, I stopped telling myself it was a trick of the light. I adjusted the side mirrors, checked the blind spots. Nothing, she didn't follow, she just reappeared. And always with the same subtle detail, coat, tear, boots. That's when I realized I'd never seen her head, or at least never the face. Her beanie was low and her hair, long and stringy, hung in front, always the same position. Arms down, shoulders hunched slightly forward. I started timing the appearances. From the first sighting, the intervals were nearly exact, about 18 to 20 minutes apart. Like clockwork, like some part of her wasn't walking, just resetting. I grabbed my phone and used the voice recorder. 11:34 p.m. Standing by mile marker 146, left side of road. 11:52, again, same position. 12:11, third instance, no movement. My voice cracked on that last one, because I realized something. She wasn't asking for help. She wasn't signaling. She wasn't walking. She wasn't doing anything. But I was noticing her more each time, and the more I noticed, the sharper the details became. I saw a dark smudge on her left sleeve. I saw a strip of silver tape on her right boot, halfway unpeeled. I saw that the tear in the coat moved a little with the wind, and the wind only hit her coat. Not her hair, not the weeds around her, just the coat. That's when I stopped trying to explain it. I stopped recording, I stopped counting, but I didn't stop seeing her. For 90 miles, she stood. Same distance from the road, same posture, always just on the edge of my field of vision. She never got closer, but she never went away. I stopped at a truck pullout just past Clayton. Nothing official, just one of those gravel patches wide enough to let you rest without getting clipped by someone drifting lanes. I got out, walked around the cab, drank from a bottle of water I barely remembered packing. It was cold that night, not winter, but the kind of spring cold that clings to metal. I remember checking the tires and rubbing my palms together, but the back of my mind was elsewhere. She hadn't been there for about 20 minutes. That's why I stopped. Not because I was tired, not because I needed to, but because she'd missed a beat. I climbed back into the cab. That's when I noticed the smell. At first, I thought it was the vents. Maybe I had turned on the defroster without realizing, but the dials were off. Everything was silent. The air smelled wet, not moldy, not garbage, just wet, like damp leather that had been sealed too long. There was a metallic edge to it too, faint, like the smell of coins rubbed between fingers. I checked the floor mats. Nothing wet. I opened the window slightly, barely an inch, and it was worse. Not stronger, just sharper. I rolled it back up. I remember leaning toward the dash, sniffing like an idiot, trying to isolate it. I even checked under the seat. Nothing. Nothing in the cab was out of place, but the smell was around me, not from something, just present. I checked my jacket, my shirt, nothing. And then I realized I could taste it, that same metallic tang, dry in my throat. I hadn't swallowed blood, hadn't bit my lip, but I tasted iron, like something sharp had been held in my mouth and removed. I cracked the door open, got out again. The air outside was clean, silent, no crickets, no traffic, and the smell was gone. I stood there, hand on the doorframe, just breathing, trying to remember if I'd picked someone up, if I'd stopped somewhere and forgotten. But I hadn't. I was sure of that. The pullout overlooked a shallow ravine. I stared into it for a long time. No movement, just rock and dead branches. But when I got back in the cab, the smell had returned, exactly the same. That was when I remembered what someone once told me at a truck stop diner, back when I first got into long haul. He'd said, if something wants to follow you, it doesn't always ride in the seat. Sometimes it rides in your memory of the air. At the time, I thought he was crazy. But that night I sat perfectly still in the cab, engine off, radio silent, and just listened. The smell didn't fade, but I didn't feel alone anymore. I'm not a superstitious guy. I log my miles, keep my rig maintained, follow routes by the book. But I've spent enough nights alone on roads that forget their own names to know when something's off. A month after the coat woman, that's what I call her now, I stopped at a rest stop near the Nevada line. It was one of those generic ones with vending machines, laminated maps, and a stack of pamphlets no one reads. I flipped through a local publication that caught my eye. Something about highway folklore. Ghost lights, disappearing towns, the usual fringe stuff. But one page stopped me cold. There was a paragraph, half a column, on something called anchor entities. I took a photo. It said, unlike traditional hauntings, anchor figures do not bind to places. They bind to roots. These presences manifest repeatedly along a path where their trauma was unacknowledged, unresolved, or ignored. Often mistaken for recurring hallucinations, anchor figures appear at regular intervals, unchanged in posture or detail. They do not attempt contact. They do not chase. Their role is not to pursue, but to remain visible as a test of witness. I reread that line a dozen times, unchanged in posture or detail. I went home that weekend and searched everything I could: forums, dispatch logs, truckers talking in threads from 10 years ago. One guy mentioned a barefoot girl in Nevada who stood at mile 322 every night for a year. Another claimed to have seen a man in suspenders walking west, always west, for 6 counties straight. But the coat woman was different. She didn't walk, she didn't follow, she waited. And the more I saw her, the more I understood something I never said out loud. She wasn't trying to leave. She was waiting for someone who never stopped, someone like me, someone who passed her once, maybe a decade ago, and never noticed. Someone who drove by without seeing the tear in her coat, the mismatched boots, the way her hair hung in place like it wasn't moved by time. And now she reappears for every version of me that didn't stop, not to be rescued, but to be recognized. I don't drive that route anymore, not because I'm afraid, but because one night, about 6 months after that drive, I saw her standing on the overpass near Missoula, hundreds of miles from where she first appeared. Same coat, same boots, but this time she was turned slightly toward the road, head tilted just enough to suggest she was still waiting. Story 3. The Voices in Channel 19. This happened to me in 2018. I'd been running night hauls from Dallas to Flagstaff every other week, usually hauling refrigeration units or medical-grade plastics. The stretch through New Mexico was the worst, not because of the road, but because of how long you could go without seeing anything that moved. Just asphalt, darkness, and radio noise. I always kept the CB on, Channel 19. Most of us did. Even if you weren't talking, it gave you something to hear. Chatter about speed traps, way stations, whatever. It wasn't supposed to be comforting, but it kinda was, until it wasn't. One night around 2:45 a.m., I was cruising about 40 miles west of Tucumcari. Road smooth, no weather, stars out. I hadn't heard any transmissions for maybe 20 minutes, but I kept the volume up. That's when I started noticing the static wasn't random. CB static usually hums like white noise, drifting, no pattern. But this wasn't like that. There were dips and rises, pacing like something catching its breath. At first, I thought it was engine interference, so I adjusted the squelch, toggled the mic, turned it off, then back on. No change. Then I listened closer. The sound wasn't static anymore. It was rhythmic. It rose in a slow inhale, held, then dropped sharply, like breath. I said out loud without thinking, "Hello?" The second I spoke, the rhythm broke, and something replied. Not a voice, not in the traditional sense, but a shift in the signal, like my words had been fed into a delay loop and reversed. I heard, "Low, oh." It repeated, again, slower. I stared at the radio. My mic was off. Still, the sound pulsed, like the CB was stuck in reverse, playing my own voice back through some bent filter. I turned the dial all the way down. The sound stopped, but only for a second. Then, even with the volume off, the speaker let out a faint hiss, just barely audible, a static exhale. I unplugged the power supply. It clicked silent. I drove the rest of the stretch in silence, both hands gripping the wheel. I kept glancing at the dead CB unit, waiting for the screen to light up again. It never did, but my ears buzzed. A high-pitched ring, like I'd heard something too loud but couldn't remember the sound. I didn't sleep that night. And the next day, when I rewired the CB, brand new fuse, fresh cables, it powered up without issue. But the frequency was off. Channel 19 showed as active, strong signal, but no voices. No one on the line. Only that slow, cyclical breath. Like the air inside the channel wasn't empty anymore. A few weeks after the incident, I started sleeping worse. I'd always slept light in the cab, just part of the job, but now I was waking up for no reason, no noise, no movement, just awake like someone had nudged me. One night, pulled off near Grants, I parked in a rest area. Lot was half full, weather clear. I hadn't heard anything strange on the CB for 2 days. I even left it unplugged, just in case. I lay down around midnight, fan humming, cab slightly tilted from the lot's grade. I felt tired, bone tired, and drifted off fast. But I woke up with a jolt. Not from a sound, from a phrase. It wasn't spoken. It didn't come from outside. It just landed in my head. Wake up now. Not loud, not alarming, just clear. The kind of clarity that cuts through dreams. I sat up, heart pounding, looked around. Everything was normal. No lights outside, no movement. The other rig sat still, silhouettes under orange parking lot lamps. I checked my CB, still unplugged. I picked up my phone. 2:08 a.m. The fan was still running, nothing out of place, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had spoken to the part of me that listens in sleep. It hadn't come through my ears. It had surfaced inside my thoughts, like an echo I'd been carrying. And I knew, with a strange kind of certainty, that if I hadn't woken up, something would have happened. I didn't know what. I still don't. I stepped outside and walked around the lot. Nothing. No signs of anyone moving. But when I got back into the cab, I caught a whiff of something. The same metallic smell from weeks ago, but sharper, wet, like the air had been exhaled through old metal. I checked the CB again. Still dark. I turned on the ignition. The truck powered up clean, but the radio, the regular FM one, was scrambled, static, all stations, even the weather band. I turned it off. That night, I didn't sleep again. I waited until dawn and drove out before the sun cleared the horizon. As I merged back onto the highway, a thought passed through my head, completely unprovoked. You were the only one who heard it this time. I didn't say that to myself. I just had it, like it had been left there, folded inside my memory. Something hadn't transmitted a message to me. It had planted a memory of being told. A week later, I joined an old trucker forum. I'd never been big on that stuff. Most threads were just people ranting about fuel prices or bad dispatches. But I wanted to see if anyone else had heard what I did. I searched the forums for keywords: CB, static, reverse audio, channel 19. One thread stood out, posted 3:02 a.m., 3 nights earlier. Subject: is anyone else hearing a guy breathe on 19 after midnight? It had one response. Sometimes it's not breathing, sometimes it's waiting. That was it. No other replies. The thread went cold, but the timestamp got to me, because 3:02 a.m. was right after I'd woken up in the rest area. I clicked the user profile. The guy who posted it had only one other message on the site, months earlier, about echo signals bouncing around Nevada routes during snowstorms. I reached out privately, asked if he was still hearing anything. No reply. His account was deleted the next morning. I started digging into CB signal anomalies. Most of what I found was normal interference, solar flares, magnetic activity, that kind of thing. But one term kept popping up in fringe discussion boards: observer syndrome. It was an unproven theory, not scientific, more like trucker lore. The idea was this: some drivers don't listen. They're listened through. Their presence allows dormant channels to reawaken, not by transmission, but by attention. Another forum post went further. You tune in, you open the door, but eventually you're not tuning in. You're being broadcasted back, looped and reversed. Your silence gets recorded, then played, waiting for the next person who listens long enough. I didn't know what to believe, but I started noticing something else. The static wasn't only on 19 anymore. It began seeping into other frequencies. Shortwave, even FM sometimes. Usually late, usually when I was tired, a crackle between songs, a rhythmic pause. Once I heard my own name, not said, just formed. Kev-Ern. That was enough. I disconnected the CB completely, ripped the unit out and left it in a dumpster behind a way station. But the sound didn't stop. It was in my sleep now, not every night, but enough. I'd dream of roads without ends, asphalt forming ahead of me with each breath, like my mind was laying track just to keep moving, and I'd hear it again, faintly always from somewhere behind me, not the voice, the breath, like someone listening, not to what I said, but to when I stopped saying anything. There's no way to prove this, no audio files, no logs, but the final message I received or remembered came not from a speaker, not from a dream, but from silence. It said, "When you speak again, we'll know where you are." I haven't used a radio since, but sometimes, when I pass another rig at night and glance up into the dark cab, I wonder if they're listening, or if they're being listened through. And somewhere, on a dead channel, no one dares monitor anymore. Someone else is hearing the same breath and waiting for me to say something back.